size.
Welcome to the ZNL podcast, a podcast brought to you by ZN, the OG digital agency in Brussels.
Hello and welcome to this episode of ZNL special summer edition. It's hot. We're in Brussels and you will be listening to this later in the summer as we are approaching a very exciting moment for the September edition of the EU Influencer event. And we're going to talk about this because I have two fabulous guests today, Antonin and Jesús, who are both from the ZN team and have been working tirelessly on EU Influencer alongside many other people on the team and some of our amazing suppliers like the team at AVS, who actually is partnering with us to create the event. So really trying to create an experience, a story, and basically something that people will enjoy, share, and remember. So today with me, we have two people that need no introduction, but I will still introduce them. Jesús, who is the COO of ZN, having been with us for a long time and has a background in art, is an extensive reader and also a designer and also a technophile who loves to develop new things and push things to the frontier of what can be done. He loves robots, he loves VR, and he loves the future of how we're going to communicate and transform the way we interact, learn, and do things. So, Jesús, great to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
And we also have Antonin, who is our creative director, and he is really the man who brings the story to life and designs something that will connect with you emotionally and basically looks at how we can take stories and illustrate them with all the amazing new tools we have out there, among other things. How are you today, Antonin?
I'm doing great. Lovely to join the podcast.
Excellent. Well, so happy to have you here. Normally we have guests from all over the place, and we're very happy to have a ZN special edition. So I want to talk about the thing that we're very excited about, and we're going to talk about a few other things in a minute. But we have the EU Influencer event where we rank the top digital influencers in Brussels. And this year we have called this Europe on the Edge. And I think, we are all a bit nervous, a bit curious about where the world is taking us with all this uncertainty, all this chaos. This applies not only to business, but to communication and to the future of geopolitics. So, Anto, you've worked on the concept and bringing it to life. So what is Europe on the Edge for you, and how are you trying to bring this to life for our event?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole process of how we came up, with the let's say title of the event was actually really a really interesting process of brainstorming with you, with me, and with also Jesús. We were talking about, okay, what's the context that we're in now? And like you said, Phil, like there's all this uncertainty, and it can go either way, right? The edge can be the edge of chaos, but it also can be the edge of opportunity, and we love that ambiguity. And at the same time, it's a very you kind of like want to react to that kind of statement. So that there's a kind of essence of like, okay, what do I want to say about that? What do I want to respond about it? So there's a very inviting aspect of dialogue, of exchange on that, and I felt like that was really nice. And also compact, short. It's a door opener for a lot of things. So for me, that was really an interesting aspect. And then from there, really taking then that as a kind of a starting point to see, okay, how can we then start to illustrate? How could Europe be literally on the edge? How could we maybe go into a bit of a surrealistic kind of, environment where, potentially the buildings of Europe are really on the edge of a cliff and they're about to fall and things are a bit floating in the air. And how could we make that kind of happen? And that's where AI, I feel, really takes its own to really take a kind of crazy imaginative kind of image and start to bring it to life, which maybe was something that maybe you could have illustrated before or something like that, but nowadays you're really able to kind of take something that you have in your mind. And I really had kind of that vision of the elements And so I can quickly show and describe a little bit for the audio only people, a little bit the process that we had of imagery. I can show you basically where we started, and also where we ended up as the finalized kind of visual. Of course, one of the things that we did is we started, of course, by exploring lots of different avenues. Once we kind of felt like this was a good kind of look and feel, that was one of the first kind of visuals that we had, with the kind of buildings that were there, and this kind of cliff, these kind of like clouds that were a little bit reminiscent of this kind of manga is kind of like a bit surrealistic kind of environment. At the same time, it could be very like chaotic, but at the same time there's a bit of hope in there in the tonalities, so I thought that was really, really interesting. And then there's this kind of two-tone aspect. There's the European institutions, Brussels kind of environment on one side, and on the other side there's what we consider the the influencers that are a bit watching. And this is the point where we started introducing the kind of typography in there. So there's also where AI, it's not just a one-click thing, right? For us, it really goes to a next level where you're able to take AI and able to play with the tools that we already know and use very well, to kind of, okay, how can we then start marrying things typographically to really tell a story, right? And then refining the elements, bringing all the graphical elements, and then refining. As you can see here, for example, we adjusted those influencers to be really holding the camera becoming a bit of the symbol, right? That is this tool that you can like either use for just observing things or making a positive impact, right? And from there, refining until this was the final visual that you probably have seen as well on social media. So that was a bit the process there. Jesus, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
Yeah, just a couple of things, and I'll come to you, Jesus. I think just for our listeners, we have this kind of floating commission on a kind of cliff edge, and then people in the front who are observing it with their phones, which has become, as you said, the symbol that we want to illustrate that this is the new kind of tool for influence. Jesus, I want to bring you in because I have two questions. What is Europe on the edge for you? Because I know that you always want something more optimistic when we have these discussions. So where do you think how should people think about this, and where do you see this kind of concept taking us?
Well, actually, I have the impression that every time there is a big shift in geopolitical situation or paradigm, always it goes hand by hand with a big change in terms of technical development, no? And I think that we're living also at the same time a big transition on the way that we have been doing content until now. There was a big shift on the Web 2.0 at the time with the social media and all that, and we saw that there was also a moment of shift or changes in the way that we were communicating, because there were new tools, and there was the whole social media and all that, and that was affecting in the geopolitical space. Nowadays, I have the impression that we live in another change of paradigm in terms of technical, and at the same time affecting the geopolitical. I think things go hand by hand, and this is more or less what we wanted to express here in this visualization and in this event. So, and not necessarily for the negative. Actually, things are changing. We see that that there is a big shift or a big change on many things on the political space, but also on the communication space with the new tools, mainly AI, which is there, but other elements that are coming up also that are starting to show us a new way of communicating that is little by little coming. Actually, I was thinking before this discussion, feel that I think last year we were already discussing what were the new trends and all that, and we were, I think, showcasing their things that we were seeing it like in the far future, and nowadays we already are having it, and actually we're incorporating it on the day-to-day work. Actually, what Antonin was saying, almost all the visuals now, I don't think there is any visual that we do as a then that is not passing through AI, for example, or almost all the content that we're creating, we're all the time introducing AI in one way or another, also on our processes, on our way of working and all that. So I think there are a lot of influence of the way of doing things on the new tools and how that is affecting our society and the way that we live.
Yeah, and I think one of the points you made is that we're using a lot of AI tools, and I think this is something quite difficult for a lot of our listeners and a lot of the people that we work with, which is that essentially AI offers all these possibilities, but at the same time, it's quite hard to master because of this unpredictable nature. And I think we need to mute one of the phones there
Yeah, sorry.
because of the unpredictable nature of the tools and the results. So what happens is you create a prompt that basically generates an image, but then you have this kind of back and forth between the designer and the image to try and make it work. So Anto, maybe I just want to get your sense of, first of all, where are we today in terms of using the tools to generate outcomes that were impossible before?
Mm.
But then at the same time, how much skill and technical know-how do you need to be able to get to a result that's good and that doesn't look like a kind of weird image, which I think we really see both online. We see a lot of slop, which is
Mhm.
basically AI generated content, whether
Yeah.
it's design or text. But I feel that people don't really understand yet what is possible and how
Mm.
you get to an outcome that's there. So tell us a little bit about what
Yeah.
your thoughts
So
are.
I kind of compare it a little bit to like similarly how before, like at some point, painting became very accessible, right? And that was still a tool that, people could use. You could get your brushes, you could get color, you could get all these tools, right? But that doesn't mean everybody was doing like the best paintings ever, right? There were a lot of paintings that were like meh. Same thing with photography. Photography came, it made, like even when we had it on our phones, it became very accessible, right? Everybody could take a picture. Doesn't mean everybody took the amazing pictures that some artists are able to go to. And I think what makes a difference for me is like the aspect of just grit and patience. A lot of times is like people don't have the patience to kind of go a little bit further. They want to be able to have something like very quickly, but a person that is creative knows that this is a process of love, that it takes time, that it takes really determination and patience to kind of go towards a bit more further than the first result that you would get, right? Another aspect of forms that I feel is also makes a big difference is being able to kind of to be able to curate really the elements basically when you receive them. So you'll receive, for example, on Midjourney, lots of different kind of results. And similar to how you have to do it also in photography, a photographer can take 100 pictures, right? But the amazing photographer will be able to select the 2 pictures that are the amazing ones because of this reason, that reason, this reason, right? And other people wouldn't have even selected that, right? So that's also the aspect of curation that is really present also in the world of AI. You get a lot of results, and you need to be kind of like not really satisfied with that first thing, or be able to identify, okay, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and how can I change it? That's where the skill comes in, right? Because a lot of times maybe people will be able to generate something, but then they'll be stuck with it, right? They'll be like, well, I need to change this, but I can't. So, for example, a very good example was in the visual that we had, where you see the 3 different kind of buildings. The one in the middle, the one of the Council of Europe, where you have a ball inside the building. At first, wasn't looking enough. And I remember a conversation that we were having with Jesus, where he was like, "Oh, we needed to have it, more like the actual building, right?" And so it took us trials and trials and trials until we actually managed to get it. And we tried lots of different things, experimented with different techniques, combinations of different techniques, until we got the right results, right? And it took us, a lot of tries, but we had the patience, we had the determination to get to that, and we knew where we wanted to. We had the vision of like where we wanted to go there. So voilà, that was a little bit on that part.
Yeah, I think that, as you said, there's a lot of trial and error. And because of the way AI is being communicated today, there's often an expectation, which I think is not very helpful, that you can just enter a prompt and that you're going to see exactly what you want in your imagination appear. The reality is that, especially with the visual things, the videos and the cameras, it's a lot of this work to go back and forth. And what I find interesting is that it's in fact the idea that's becoming even more important than before, because you need to think about something interesting and not just make a photo come to life, because that's just boring. Especially because, as soon as there's a new version of a new technology, we see so many of these things appear. So it's having that creative idea of what we can do with the tools as they are there, as we have them at the level of capability they have today. And that's the other problem, is that capability keeps changing. So we have new
Right.
tools. We have Sora, we have Google VO, we have lots of different tools, but we don't really know how far we can take them. And so you first have like, oh, they just rolled out a new version of an AI tool. Everybody's doing something. And then suddenly one idea becomes a meme, and then everybody applies the same prompt to everything, like the cardboard cutout. And so, at the beginning, the idea is quite impressive, and then it becomes generic, and then it becomes slop. So what are your thoughts on how you get around, how do you keep that focus on the idea and not get swallowed by the tools that are very exciting, but that are just tools?
Yeah. So I think what it boils down to for me is really the creative process as we know it, and you could call it the traditional creative process. Is like, what am I trying to say? Who am I trying to say it to, right? And then how can I introduce an element that's a little bit unexpected, right? So a lot of time with creative processes, you want to kind of even subvert the method, that everybody's doing. So if everybody's going one side, you probably want to go a little bit differently, right? So a lot of times the creative process also is a kind of reaction process. Okay, everybody's making the memes of this. Maybe I'll take these and this and make something different. And for me, that's the essence of the creative process, right? You'll take something and another element that maybe people wouldn't have seen a connection between, you make that connection and you use it in a way that maybe other people haven't, right?
Okay.
I mean, the technical evolution is permitting us to do things easier, in an easier way, the same way as photography, when it appears, made us easier to make a portrait.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you didn't need somebody being there for hours in front of a painter to get a portrait. But it's true that to take a good picture, you need a good photographer, and you need somebody who knows how to get the final good picture.
Yeah, and then also in general, like the level of expectation of everybody also raised, right? People were expecting a portrait, so then the ones who would be really good would be like, okay, how can we do it differently, either with the emotion or with the lighting or the thing. So the same process basically here applies. Is like, now that the bar is being leveled up, right? How can then the ones that want to stand out can be even more creative with those things, and that's what makes a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we have. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that what Antonin was saying at the beginning is key. At the end of the day, is what you want to tell, how you want to tell, and what is original on that way of telling the story and all that. So it's not about using the tool as such. The tool are permitting then to make things in a more effective way, or making things that maybe before you couldn't really do it. There are examples of I don't know, shootings that we, at the time, we needed a full team to create a shooting, and then you needed to travel, I don't know, really far to make an amazing shot of a tree in the middle of I don't know, of a forest or whatever. Nowadays you can do it directly with your computer in front of you. So but to get a good quality of that visual, and that is appropriate and is aligned to the campaign and all that requires requires a knowledge that is mainly the creative team, the ones who can deliver that.
Yeah, and I also think we're going to be facing a problem similar to the CGI issue. When CGI was introduced in the movies, suddenly all the movies are using CGI, and specifically for those Star Wars fans, a lot of the Star Wars franchise got a lot of CGI, and then there was basically a backlash. And what you see today actually is people like Denis Villeneuve with Dune saying, I need to spend 2 days to get the right sun set on my desert shot, because I want that feeling of authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very interesting as we become capable of doing so much more. And let's be honest, we're not shooting Dune on most of our projects. So the question is, what do you need to bring in physically and authentically, so that it's a real story? And then how can you use those tools to bring the story to another level of quality, of telling a good
But
a story.
I remember a discussion. It was a long time ago, because I remember an artist who decided to make a fantasy of the animation of Disney, and that time Flash. You remember when Flash was there?
Yeah.
That was permitting to make animations and all that. So he made all the fantasy movie done on Flash exactly, and it was exactly the same as the one of Disney. But
Right.
the key point there, and what he was saying directly in the conference that he was giving, is that at the end of the day, I just reproduced that. The great part of fantasy was not only how it was done, but also what is behind fantasy, or what is the thought about creating fantasy and bringing together the music with the colors and you see. So that is something unique that happens on the head of somebody that defines the same as you're saying. Dune is not only the fact that there is the movie, you can reproduce it, you can do again the same, but to create all that universe in your mind and come up with that idea and all that, still I think just using AI is not possible. You need to live and to think about that, and to have some creativity behind that and all that.
Yeah.
That is not possible to happen like that. With a campaign is the same. There must be some thought behind why you're doing that, what is the scope of it, and then after that you decide what is going to be the tool that you're going to use to develop.
Exactly. Because I think there's something also interesting in the sense of, like, you see the progression, that now AI kind of, like, visuals in general are taking. It's more and more like, okay, realistic. But we'll come to a point basically where the thing looks very realistic, but if it doesn't have something interesting, or it doesn't tell an interesting story, you'll be like, so what, right?
Yeah.
You won't be able to know that it's AI or not AI. It will just look like a visual, and then people will just revert back, like you said with CGI, Phil. They'll be like, well, the story is not good, right? Even if the amazing quality, but where's the story? So the story still is king, right?
Absolutely, and I think that's what we saw. Even with the web, we had the early generation of YouTube videos, which were very rough and kind of done in a very simple way. And then the expectation was it has to be cleaner and better, but you still want it to be authentic. You want to feel that the person is real. You don't want a studio that completely cleans up everything in the back. But indeed, I think what's very important in a conversation, of course, we have when we're working on communication campaigns with our clients is you've got to first focus on the core story you're trying to communicate, who you're trying to communicate it with, what is the policy context in which you're operating, who are you trying to get to connect with, and then you have all these tools available to do a better job at doing that. But I think I think this is the big mistake that organizations do, is to think either to jump to the execution and the tactics too quickly and say, look, I just want you to set up a LinkedIn channel or create a video or do this, but there isn't a kind of underlying story that you're trying to say. And I think if you get the story right, then everything else gets much stronger, and then you execute. Then you can concentrate on improving the execution. So that's a big challenge. Now coming back to sorry, Jesus.
No, and I think on the influencer event, actually, we are playing a bit on that, and all the visualization that we're creating and the experience of the audience, and I hope that we get to the point that we want to. I think the experience is going to be like that. There will be a moment where the audience will kind of connect with this kind of movement that we're living now, or this kind of shift that we're living now, where the mobile phones are becoming like a symbol that is part of ourselves and all that. What is behind the phone? What is happening? This part of the inside the machine, outside the machine. So there is a whole story there that we are preparing cool audiovisual, and Antonin and the team
very exciting.
That is looking very exciting. So.
Yeah, and I think this is the key thing about this event, is that every year we get a chance to basically experiment with new tools, because since we're not constrained by a client brief, and we can really do fun things, and some of them might not work. Now we are working, I think, on a format that we're fine tuning. So just to have a flow that we feel comfortable with. But I think it's this moment where you say, look, I want people who come into the room to connect to the whole experience. And I think last year we really felt that, as you walk into the room, you see the colors, you see the lighting, and you feel special. And I think this is one of our objectives, is that we want to show people that influence in the digital space is key. And so we're honoring that by saying, look, we're taking people who are doing what we think is interesting work, and our disclaimer is that we don't have to agree with what people say, but we think they influence the conversation on key topics relating to the EU. And so we put them on stage, we ask them to share their experience, but they have to, we want to put the spotlight on them. And then from that spotlight on stage, it goes online. So I think it's that, that's the story. The other thing that I think is very interesting this year is, we've always predicted that digital influence would be critical in shaping the policy, the media story, perception in society at large. And I think this year, every single study is showing that, traditional media is being displaced by digital tools, and most people get their news from these new tools. So the people in the room are now, beyond any doubt, the people who shape the conversation. So I think, this is very important, very, very interesting. Are there any things that you think are key to connecting the physical with the online? And then I'll ask the same question to Jesús.
Yeah. So for me, one of the super important things for me is a mindset shift, right? You need to look at your event not as like a singular, encapsulated thing. There is opportunity at every single turn, and it's about seeing that opportunity, right? Like to create content. You have to look at that event as a place where you can create content, where you can actually amalgamate actually and really capture as much as you can, right? A lot of the let's say the usual way that you see an event is done is a lot of preparation, and then the event is like it's just happening. But actually, no, this is not the moment where it's just happening. You should be able to connect actually and capture as much as possible so that you can actually bring that online, right? So it's that shift of like, okay, where do I see cool opportunities? There's interesting things happening, right? So that I can actually take that content, bring that online. And then it's also the mindset shift of like, okay, what does the online audience want to know about this specific subject, right? And so thinking also about the audience and about what are the kind of things that they would want to kind of hear about, or the interesting things that they would want to maybe ask questions about, to really create that dialogue and to make that come in back into the offline.
Yeah, Jesús?
Well, for me, I think I've already shared in other discussions we had in the past, but for me, the event is a great opportunity to generate content, because all the most important people, or the people that are important in your topics or your area, are there at that moment. So then it's the great opportunity then to have them maybe talking to a camera, giving some ideas, or to engage on the conversation. So it's a great opportunity for that. So what we normally do is that events like this help us then to develop or to create content that we can then distribute in our channels for months, actually. So, and sometimes I have the impression that in the Brussels space, there is a tendency of forgetting about that. And you go to events, and normally there is nobody that is taking that opportunity to create content that then they can leverage afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And, obviously we all know that this is something that we've been talking about to our clients for many, many years. But I mean, even just, a couple of months ago, I went to several events and there was no online thinking. I'm not talking about yes, there's a post on LinkedIn after saying, hey, we had a conversation, you tag 5 people. But I think what we started to do is really have, first of all, a system to do that. So you make sure that you create a series of interviews, which means you need to get people to talk for 5 minutes, even more if you can. So you need the room, you need the camera, you need the setup, and you need to think about what they're going to say that will be evergreen. So it can't be something that it's not, oh yeah, I'm at the event and I really like what that speaker said, because most people will not see that. So you need to change the context. And then you need to take pictures that maybe give you a feeling, because again, nobody cares about an event with a bunch of people sitting on a table or on stage and just having nameplates with a ugly PowerPoint screen in the back. What they want is a feeling that the event was interesting, and then they want the content. But of course, the other big mistake people do, and I think they're doing it less now, but it was, okay, let's film the event and upload it or stream it. And it's like, that is not good content. That is really typically unwatchable, and even the sound is not great. Is you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, no, I'm jumping there because actually that makes me really nervous. People on the venue, they consume the content, what is on the stage, in a very different way that if they are online. So just keep in mind that those are two different media, two different things. So as you are well saying, uploading the recording of the whole session online and all that is not going to help at all. So there are many other ways of creating that content for online version, and there are many other opportunities apart of just recording what's happening on stage.
Yeah, and I think this is the key thing here, is that you have to have the right idea, and I think this is what we call our kind of before, during, and after approach to events. But the concept, okay, it's a good one, but it's very hard to do well. And as we know, because we put a lot of energy in preparing this particular event, it's like, okay, you really need planning, and you need to think of all the moments that can go wrong, and you need to think, okay, if I'm gonna use some of the content on stage, the sound needs to be good, but not just for the room, for the recorded version that I'm going to reuse later. And I think actually what is really good, and we've seen it with, in particular, last year's event, because if you look at our history with EU Influencer, every year, I think we get a little bit better at certain parts of the execution. And in the end, you have hundreds of small things that actually come together and allow you to do these interviews, these clips, these vox pops, so like combining all these different things. And I think that's the thing that's really hard to do, because if you approach this as a traditional event, you're just going to say, okay, I want my speakers. Yes, I'll put a mic, I'll have a camera, I'll take some pictures. But that just doesn't really work, because every event in Brussels also looks the same. And that's why you need to have different colors, a different feel. And the other thing that we're looking at this year, and I'm also very excited about this, is that there's a different video language, which is the language of Instagram and TikTok, which is becoming the language that we're used to on social media. And we want to bring that into the conversation in terms of some of the things we're going to communicate, but also we have some Instagrammers coming that will be creating some content there. And again, these are all things that we're seeing in different areas. In Brussels, as often, it's taking a while for it to happen. But so I think we're very excited about how we're orchestrating that moment. I'm sure it's going to be really fun and interesting. We know the people that come on stage are experts and very knowledgeable, but we also think a lot of people in the room are going to be creatively participating at the event. And actually, in the end, for us, I think the biggest impact is what happens in the next 6 to 12 months after the event, because that's the whole conversation. And those clips that we put, I see some of them. I think, Anto, I saw both of you actually some of your clips were showing, and it's actually still very relevant, but it's obviously you're seeing it in a very different context. Jesús, you want to jump in?
Yeah, you say a word that for me is key, is the impact. Because at the end of the day, the event impact is not just that your boss is coming and say it went well, or the 2 or 3 members saying, hey, it was good, there were a lot of people, or the food was great. It's not that the impact of the event. The impact you see when actually, if you leverage the whole content, you see that there is an engagement online, that your message is transmitted, that then there are people that are engaging with that and with the content that you're creating. Then is when you can actually measure all that impact. So you spend a lot of money for what? For just having somebody saying, hey, it was good, we enjoyed. No, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a tool, is one of the key tools of all your communication. You need to be able to measure it and to use it properly.
Yeah, I want to take a step now to the bigger context. Basically, we're going to look at digital influence. We're going to play with the new technologies. Now, what are the things that you are both looking at in terms of the new technology? And this is something for you, Anto, that I'm always quite fascinated about. It's very small things as well as big things, and I know you're very excited about something to do with fonts. So,
Yes.
what is it, and why do people have to care about fonts? I know you care a lot about fonts.
I do
You
care
and
more
Satya,
than
and Steve Jobs was obsessed with fonts. I don't know if you know the backstory, but he
I.
studied
Yeah.
calligraphy and said that helped him to bring the
Yeah.
fonts to the Mac.
I'm very personally the believer that typography is one of the main tools that really can change perception in terms of how people have a first impression, like milliseconds impression on a kind of branding or a visual, right? Of course, the imagery is very important, but typography is like one of the other things that is just, and you can go into the whole theory of it, and there's definitely a whole world there. So that's for me one of the big passions that I have is how are people able to kind of create the right kind of like impression, right? And how are people able to kind of like completely get it right when there's the right balance and the right kind of elements. So one of the elements that I wanted to relate to is the fact that I was seeing this trend that it started quite a while back, but it's been growing and growing. And I'll share my screen to show a little bit, but I'll describe as well. We've seen this kind of general tendency for a lot of big organizations. Let's say you have the Reddits, for example, now, and TikTok as well. They created their own set of typography. So typography, as we know, it's all the text that we have in front of us. A lot of people see it as something that is it's just part of life. They don't even notice when there's something or else. But in our world, this is something that makes a massive difference on the perception that you can have and the feeling that it can give. It can make a product feel so much more inviting, or so much more aggressive, or so much more dynamic. It changes so much if you manage to get it right. And it's another tool that can help support basically your whole campaign or product or whatever you want to create. And making something that is custom made, of course, permits you to have something that is really tailored to the conditions of a certain organization. And one trend that we saw is actually a lot of organizations that were doing these custom fonts, which take a lot of effort. It's not just something, again, like a click of a button kind of thing. It's something that takes really a lot of effort by very skilled people that have to actually work for quite a long time. They were actually putting those typographies on the open source platforms, like, for example, Google Fonts, which at first you would say, like, why would you do something like that, right? And so there's a couple of reasons for this kind of trend to be happening. First of all is accessibility. A lot of these organizations are scattered all around the world, right? And have a lot of issues actually of being able to kind of have everybody in their organization be on the same page and have the same consistent font, right? And so putting it actually on the open source platforms like Google Fonts makes it very, very easy, much easier actually, to everybody who wants to actually use that typography for the organization to be able to use it. But at the same time, also, it creates a kind of perception in terms of like recognizing also the whole like world of independent content creators, right? In terms of typography, right? There's a whole world in there, and basically recognizing that they have a place actually to be able to tinker with things, to learn about things. So it's making also that elements. It's like you see now with the world of AI, there's a whole lot of open source kind of models that are being released so that people can experiment with it, and so it's connecting to that element as well. So it's really interesting to have that as well as elements. So as I was saying, there was certain typographies that can also be like more than just like one typography. There's a whole segment of what we call variable typographies that are coming in. So that also creates a whole context of how to use it. And you see a lot of companies actually using already the platforms like Google Fonts, for example, that can support that also. So it's also all the aspect. But again, these are all getting into the weeds of typography. But the main thing to remember is that more and more big organizations actually are bringing their custom fonts actually to the open source. And so you can actually access them, tinker with them as you feel.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about fonts is that obviously most people don't think about it that much. But then when you have a font problem, so for example, you took a font and you couldn't use it in a PowerPoint or on a website because you didn't buy it, it becomes a nightmare. And suddenly everything looks ugly when you didn't think that it was actually important. And for those who actually care about fonts, I strongly recommend watching the SNL video Papyrus on Avatar from Ryan Gosling. It's a very
amazing.
very funny thing. And the question is, why did Avatar use the Papyrus font when they had, a very, very big budget, and they ended up spending, well, actually, it's a free font. So that's a good one. Jesus, I know you are very excited about immersive technology that you believe is going to change the way we create experiences. So what is that about?
Well, as we were discussing at the very beginning, we're in the middle of many changes, and things are changing so fast that actually every day we're learning new things. Lately, there are new advances that are happening. Well, we saw not long ago the GPT-5 that is there and all that. So we see that in that front, AI is evolving strongly. On the other hand, some time ago we saw the Sora, which was great on videos, but then suddenly we got Google coming with the Genie 3, which is actually like a blown mind approach, where for those who still didn't check it or see it, actually is AI that permits to create environment spaces with interaction, in the sense that then the outcome is some kind of a almost video game, an universe where you can get inside, that is generated in real time with AI, and is impressively in good quality. So actually you feel like you are inside a movie. So it's like a video game with a really high quality. This is actually inspiring already plenty of video games organizations, I'm sure. For me, was mind-blowing, and it's still not there to be used. So what we have seen for the moment are some tests and things. What we have seen is amazing. And what I was thinking is actually combine those elements, like the artificial intelligence that can permit to create agents or your presence, like with a chatbot. Include that kind of chatbot or presence in one of those universe where actually you can enter, you can explore the universe, you can encounter this kind of bots with who you can then talk and all that. So that is showing a complete new way of navigating or interacting with the digital space to tell stories, as we were saying before. It's true that we have created for clients a lot of immersive experiences in the last month, more than when the whole hype was there with the VR and all that. So it looks like right now they see that these are good ways of showcasing stories for key people that you cannot bring to the plant or to the place where actually things are happening. So instead of that, you go to a meeting and then you can give the headset or whatever to the person to experience that. No, so that this is opening many possibilities, in the sense that then suddenly you can create spaces, stories, interactive applications and all that on 360 that are generated in real life. And then you could interact with in real life with characters, with agents and all that. So that for me is a space where I'm very excited. If you
one element also that I'm sharing the screen, and like that we can show that there's also this aspect of the fact that now with Genie 3, actually they're able to remember actually an element that was done. So you can see, for example, here that the character is painting on a wall. Right? He turns around completely, does other things, and comes back, and whatever was put actually on the wall stays consistent. That was something that was a big challenge for the models previous to that, so Genie 2 and Genie 1. And that's something that apparently managed to unblock up till actually a couple of minutes. So we're not talking about seconds anymore. We're talking about actual minutes, that was also completely mind-blowing.
And it's an interaction where the viewer is just moving the things with the keyboard and then navigating around as if it was the real person. And the quality is so amazing. It looks like you are watching a video. And it's actually
Yeah,
AI created environment. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think this is the interesting thing. It has to be a technology, uh, not a technology in search of a problem, but something that you can do for people, a solution for something people are trying to fix. And I think what we're finding is that a lot of clients, associations, and corporations are saying there are stories we want to tell, and because of the nature of our work, they tend to be complicated. There's often some logistical aspects. There's some kind of scientific story behind it, and we really need more than just sitting people in front of a video, but we need them to basically maybe be able to explore a bit more. That's why the immersive VR thing is actually, we are seeing an interest picking up. And I think as AI allows you to make those experiences more developed, and that it doesn't take 2 months to create a VR environment, but actually you can start adding new content. I think this is going to again get more traction. So I think it is indeed interesting. And
The
I
point
want
is that prompting, you can then change those environments. So that means that suddenly you can have an environment like, I don't know, there a river, that you're in a river, or a landscape. And then on that landscape, you can say, okay, make a bear appearing. But then you have another one where instead of that is a tractor, a green tractor, or then on the left, or you see, so suddenly you can change what are the actors or the elements that are appearing in that environment, and you yourself, you can start exploring as you want, because you can move around. So that is really mind
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
And Antoine, I just want to come back to, sorry, Jesus.
No, the third part of all this, I think, for me, is the fact that then at the same time the agents, because we are in the year of the agents, but still agents are not totally there. But I think that is, by the way, this one Genie 3, they say that maybe we're going to have a Genie 4 by the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to this, and hoping to have the possibility of experimenting with all this.
Yeah.
But on the agent front, what I see is there is a big trend right now of people then also starting to experiment with automation and no coding automation. So there are plenty of people experimenting with that, and I'm a bit into that, because the tendency is that to finally go to an let's say like an ecosystem where there is no need actually to use the code to develop then interactions and agents that are helping you to develop things. Still is far, but there are already tools there that are helping to explore that space, and that's where I am really right now into.
Okay. And Otto, I know that you were excited about some of the kind of things that you can do now in design and video design in terms of qualitative shifts. So what is it that you're doing, and why do you think it's important?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the times, basically, what we'll do is we'll have a certain challenge. We need to create a certain shot, right? And as I showed previously on the EU Influencer visual, it will be a bit of the same process of defining exactly what you want, right? And then you need to define really the story that you want to say. And then there's different ways and different techniques to be able to kind of translate that. Either you can do it in natural language, but also a lot of people now are doing it with what we call JSON prompting. JSON is basically just another language that the AI can understand more clearly. It looks a lot like a bit of a coding kind of language, but much more simpler, right? And that actually permits people to much more clearly evoke or make the AI understand what exactly they want to do, right? And a lot of people have been saying that that is something that created much better shots. Again, it's a debate between the natural language and the JSON prompting, but these are two elements that have been there. What's really interesting that I've seen recently is, for example, from Runway, they had their latest model. I'll share my screen for that, which is called Runway Aleph, which one of the main challenges that you see nowadays with video is that you prompt, but you're not sure what you're going to get. You might get something good, you might get something not great. And this is where we are at the stage, and people are really grappling with the sense of control, right? And so what Runway has started to do, and it's one of the first iterations of that, is the ability basically to transform a shot. So for example, if you want to have a shot, you have this original shot, for example, and you want to say, okay, make it so that And so show you then different shots of that in different angle. If you want to say, okay, please, make attach the camera to the suitcase of this shot, for example, right? But yeah,
I think there is some moments where the sound, we don't hear you. I'm not sure if
your mic dropped.
Sound on the visual.
It's potentially because of the sound there. So as I was saying, you're able to then adjust shots as you want. Now the challenge there is to keep the consistency. Here, of course, you see them a bit cherry picking, of course, their results to present it nicely. But in reality, what happens is that you will do that, and maybe some of the shots will be good, some of the shots will be not good. So what is your capacity then to be able to adjust certain things, change very specific kind of environments, or being able to say, okay, I will use this creative way to change the angle because I want to tell this story specifically, and not let the tool guide you as well. So that's also the elements that are there. And a lot of times what we'll do with our video creation process is actually we'll pit different models one against the other, right? To be able to see, okay, which one, brings in the best kind of results. So that's usually the process that we'll use.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting how, we have changed our processes and way of working because of these new tools that are creating new opportunities and new challenges. Now, in this new world, when you meet young people who tell you, I don't know what I need to learn since I just did a design course or a political course or whatever. What is your advice to these people? What are the core skills you think they need to be successful? So maybe I'll go to you first, Jesús, and then to you, Antonin.
Okay, because I know the one that Antonin is going to say because it's key. I will go for one that actually is, I think, is core. One is key, the other one is core. It's from the starting point.
Yeah.
And it's because we are living now in a situation where technically, right now, maybe not totally, but in some years possibly, you can do anything. Okay, and so technically you can then express whatever you want. But what is difficult is to know what you want to express. Okay, so it's like you have many things to tell, but you don't know which one you want to start with, or maybe you have nothing to tell, but you have all the tools to tell stories. Right. So my advice to the young people at the beginning is like you need to gather experiences because at the end of the day, the human wants to see or consume human stories or stories where human are behind that. So you need to enrich yourself as a human, reading, experiencing things, traveling, meeting people, discussing things. So then all that you tell is going always to be enriched and full of references that are then linking on the head of the people you're talking to. So for me, that would be my advice. It's like feeling your life as much as possible. Don't think that just because you have a tool, you can tell stories. You need to equip yourself as a person to be able to tell stories. So
yeah, I think it's a very good point. And I think about intuition, which is created by experience. So you only get a really strong intuition about a story, a message, a design, if you've experienced that pattern multiple times in different ways, and then you see it and you bring it together. And for me, the best way I see what you just said is that when you do a deep research and we're working on a client and you want to kind of analyze different things. I mean, if you put a question, you're going to get a 20-page answer. So you can't just read this. So you have to think deeply about the question. And when you read the answer, you have to think, does this make sense? Is that answering a meaningful question? And I find myself doing a lot of back and forth where you create one, you have a prompt, you're asking a question, you get an outcome, but then you think, okay, I'm not getting it. So I need to start again. And because it's not answering something useful. And so I need to reprompt. And sometimes the same prompt is going to give me two different answers on two different engines. But indeed, I think we are still very much in control of the direction we want to take. And that direction, because we can get all the information, all the facts, all the context from these experts, the PhD in your pocket. But if you don't tell them what you want, and if you don't know what you're trying to do, all of that is just noise. And so this is really, to get the signal from the noise, you need that experience, because without testing these things, it's just more information, more 20-page documents. So, Anto, what is your advice?
Wait, if I may. So actually, what you were saying before, you could create Star Wars today, maybe. You see, you could make a movie of Star Wars, but if you don't have the idea of Star Wars, I mean, this concept, I mean, that is coming thanks to the experience that George Lucas may had, or the dreams, or whatever. So all that is thanks to his life. You see, so that is what for me makes or gives a bit of hope to humanity in the in front of the AI.
Yeah, and in fact, for me, I'm a big fan of Andor, the Star Wars
Indeed.
series,
Wow, one of the best.
which is about story, and it's not about CGI, and it's really the characters and the small problems and the kind of the grit and the slow paced development that grabs you, not the kind of space battles and the things. So I think it's a great example of, you can take I think badly executed, very expensive, big Star Wars movie versus I'm not sure it's cheaper, but versus something that's approached from a human gritty side and get a completely different story. So Anto, what is your advice?
So I'll come back actually to a podcast that I saw recently with Sam Altman, actually the CEO of OpenAI, where he's talking a bit about, the state of AI and, especially with the release now of ChatGPT 5. And he said there is no better moment for young people to now, the ones that are just coming out, of university and are trying to kind of, build something. There's no better moment than now, actually, you have all the tools that are there, right? And what's then interesting is it's not so much about like the ability or not the ability, right? But it's more about thinking once more about the aspect of like, okay, that choice, that selection again, right? So I would say focus more on your creative process, right? Of like, okay, how do I actually tell an interesting story? Or how can I develop my brain to come up with ideas, right? That's a muscle, actually. Some people may be more talented than others, but a lot of them that are very, very, very successful are the ones that train that muscle. So experiment with just imagining things, and the most ridiculous thing, it doesn't have to be like a serious thing, right? It's a fun thing, actually. Once you start playing with it, it's like a kid, and he's just watching clouds and imagining a rhinoceros or a dinosaur or a thing. And that's just training your muscle basically to make associations, right? And once you start making those associations, actually, that's when you can use the creative AI tools with other things that maybe are not AI. Who knows, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing, but you're basically like using the things in ways that people wouldn't necessarily use them, and that makes a difference, right? And so it doesn't really matter necessarily the tool. What matters more is like, okay, how you've developed your own sensibilities as well, right? And how you then are able to express those. So taking in as much as possible, it connects a bit to what Jesus was saying, right? Live your life, but as well, like develop your creative thinking, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I just want to say one thing, because I speak to a lot of young people, including my own kids who are now young adults, thinking about their future. And I think, it is a very challenging moment because it's an open space. I think there are a lot of opportunities, but they haven't been given a structure at university, and even, society hasn't really prepared people for this kind of way of thinking. Even the job market isn't really kind of created in that way. So I think there is a big challenge, and the important thing is to embrace the challenge and to say, where are the opportunities this creates? But it's not easy, and I think, I hear a lot of people finding it extremely challenging to find these opportunities. So now we're just going to go to our recommendations. So roll jingle.
Recommendations of the week.
All right. So I think, Jesus, if you can start with your recommendations of the week.
So I will start with what I was describing before, which is the automation, because as I say, this is the year of the agents. We were talking about that, and we can see that more and more people are like wondering, okay, how can I create an agent? It's difficult sometimes because it requires a coding and all that. So there are some tools that actually are not using code, and you can then create what is the whole flow that you can then permit you to connect different tools, applications. You can define what is the trigger at the beginning, in which moment you want it to happen. You remember there are some applications online on the iPhone, for example, that permits you to create some kind of automations. If I receive this, that. So it's similar to this, but a bit more advanced. You have some of them that are paying, that you need to pay, like Zapier, for example. But there is one in particular that is N8N. And that one is one that I've been testing a bit. And there is a tutorial that is very, very simple, very easy to watch, with around 9 videos, I think. So that is the one that I want to share with those who actually wants to experiment a bit on the creation of agents. I think we're going to put the link later on the chat.
Yeah. Thank you. Anto, what is your recommendation?
So from my side, basically, I spend a lot of time getting inspiration, and like I was saying before, Pinterest, one of the main kind of elements. Now, the thing that we've seen recently is that Pinterest has been kind of receiving a lot of AI content. So there's been, again, a lot of AI slop that has kind of come in to that. And so there's a lot of other platforms that are basically more selective with their, with their choices, with the curation that they'll do basically within those platforms. And so the platform that I want to recommend to people is Cosmos, cosmos.so. That's a platform that I've been using to help diversify basically the different intakes and the different inspiration that I take. So that's my recommendation. Excellent.
So my recommendation is a book, which is actually very well connected to the event that we have. It's called The Fourth Turning is Here by Neil Howe. And it describes the cycles that we live in. He talks about a seculum, which is an 80 to 100-year cycle, and breaks down into 4 different turnings. And we are now in the 4th turning of this cycle. Now, he wrote the book in 97.
Wow.
And basically anticipated that if you follow the logic, and it's historically validated over the last several hundred years, we will, by the end of 2025, 2030, be at the end of a 4th turning, which is basically the moment of crisis. And he was, and basically it's kind of like you have, he talks about seasonalities, like, you have spring, some of you have winter, etc. But you have these kind of predictable cycles which come after a big moment of crisis. So after the crisis, there's a kind of awakening, then a rebirth, and different things. But what is very impressive about the book is how accurately he predicted the fact that we are, by all accounts, in a crisis where institutions' values and systems are being questioned. And so, the news is not looking great because we are still going into the kind of biggest moment of change. But then in 10 years, it's going to be great. So anyway, great book. And that's all we have time for. Thank you so much. And we will see you online. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the ZNL podcast. Did you like it? If so, please share it on your social media, subscribe, and give us a comment. We will see you again on the next episode. Until then, remember, stay always one step ahead.